Ready on, Joseph. All right.
Andrew, who's the final item?
Joseph De Herrera is our speaker.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you, council member.
All right, did someone check in with Joseph already?
Yes, I'm checking with them right as we speak. Thank you.
Very respectful of everybody's time.
I was just on a call with Jessica. We were finishing something up. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's all good. All right, since Joseph's item is the last one, I assume he'll be able to join us before we get there. So I just want to go ahead and call us to order. So thank you everyone for being here. My name is Juan Marcano. I have the honor and pleasure of representing Ward 4. And today I am filling in for Councilmember Murillo to chair this meeting of Horns. So Councilmember Coombs, would you like to introduce yourself for the record?
Sure, thank you. I'm Alison Coombs. I'm the Aurora City Council member representing Ward 5 and a member of this committee, I think for all of the years that I have been on council.
All right, thank you. So first item on the agenda is the approval of the September 7, 2023 minutes. It was a very, very long meeting, and I think that the minutes were written very well, so I do not have any amendments. Councilmember Coombs?
I have no changes, thank you.
Fantastic. So any announcements? Okay, seeing none. We'll move on to new business. So first up is 4A. This is an ordinance for residential rental licensing. So I believe, let's see here, Michelle is the speaker. I am the item initiator. So I'll just give a little bit of quick background and then I'll hand it off to staff. So this has come about as a result of various community groups who have been dealing with, frankly, unacceptable living conditions for a really long time. I've had the opportunity to go out and tour a couple of them. And what is happening in the city is just completely unacceptable. So this, the intent of this ordinance is to create a legal framework for us to be able to hold bad actors accountable and also generate some resources so that we can better support our code enforcement operations. So I think we have, and Sandra, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 15, right, code officers for a city of 400,000 people almost. And I think that that is frankly just not enough. So I'd like to be able to support code enforcement operations and of course give our residents protections against slumlords. Because it doesn't benefit anybody to allow decrepit and unsafe and unsanitary properties to continue to operate in the city. So we need to get those cleaned up so that we can help clean up our city while we're at it. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it off to Michelle. I think you're the primary on this.
Thank you, Councilmember Marcano. Yes, Michelle Gardner, Senior Assistant City Attorney to the City of Aurora. And for this project, And we do have also Trevor Vaughn from Tax and Licensing, I think Jessica Prosser and Sandra Youngman from Neighborhood Services and Code Enforcement on the line for additional questions. But we have been looking at Chapter 22 and necessary revisions to address habitability concerns that you and other constituents have expressed. And then we looked at adding a potential licensing program similar to City and County of Denver's licensing program for residential rental licensing. And we've been looking at multifamily dwellings, single family dwellings. We've been looking at the structure they use for hiring in third-party inspectors, home inspectors, versus having it done in-house through the contractor. We've been looking at, first and foremost, where should this licensing, registration, or certification program exist? We thought initially Chapter 86, and I think for the time being, we're looking at Chapter 22, unless there's a better, department and division within a department. But it does look like Chapter 22, Neighborhood Services, would be the place for now. So what has been presented, even though it says Chapter 86, it's probably going to exist in another code section. Substantially, it's being presented with provisions that would move forward. But again, there are some changes that we're looking at as far as home inspections, timing of when this would become implemented. Denver's is January of 2024. That's a little hasty for Aurora to be looking at that timeline too. And of course, there's the overarching concern of how do we have the administrative support and staffing needed in Aurora to make sure this program is in fact effective. So with that, I'll defer to excuse me, Trevor or Jessica, if you'd like to chime in.
Yeah, I could add a little bit on that. I think, Michelle, you kind of covered most of it. I think we'd look at, extending that time frame, making some adjustments to it. I think staff would recommend kind of improving on what Denver had, rather than just necessarily adopting it. We thought that it just fits better in the code section of the department that would enforce it, rather than treating this as kind of an additional business license, which actually I think has some potential administrative issues with the systems that we're in and licensing, where we wouldn't be the ones necessarily enforcing it. That perhaps lives better in Chapter 22, especially since we had talked afterwards that licensing may be kind of the incorrect term for this, because we're not going to be shutting places down and kicking everybody out when there's a violation here, because there's some issues with state law with that, and obviously the just the impacts of people on that, and so talking about it, calling it more like a certification, which is kind of a common term for in other states, but also providing that registration. We'd also had some discussion that including single family residential, where there are a lot of issues as well in this program. I've done some looks at the financial impact from this. Based on Denver's fee schedule, looks like the fee schedule that they have is basically only and may not even quite be covering direct costs of the program. So there's some concerns there. If this is wanting additional resources, the fee schedule I think would need to be substantially higher. Denver ended up spending, what they told me was they ended up spending about $300,000 on system costs, $50,000 on communications, and hiring 5 staff just to try to get people to get the license and process the license, not even to do inspections and enforcement. Enforcement just to get them to get it. And I think we'd also talked about, rather than with Denver, where they allow they kind of certify inspectors and then allow the businesses to hire the inspectors, that there may be some concerns there with inspector shopping, and it might be a better program if the city was to actually contract private inspectors to do that and then pass the cost along. I've been told those per unit inspection costs are somewhere around $150 to $200 per unit, and then also the adjustments that we've seen some of the proponents ask for could be including changing from 10% of units to 25%, inspecting more units and making sure that's done that way. So if this was to move forward, we would recommend making those adjustments before the next step in the process. And then I don't know if Jessica has anything else to add on that, or that's good enough.
Yeah, I would just, echo some of those things related to single family. Our current systematic housing inspection is, greater than 8 units. And so we'd want to really look at the smaller ones. Some of our most problem properties are, duplexes and single family. So addressing that. And then just need some time to really do some fiscal analysis. We have quite a bit of admin time that goes into our systematic housing inspections. And just also looking at the length of time the process takes to get property into compliance. Right now, through our regular process, it can be quite lengthy. And so any other possibilities for getting properties ultimately into compliance faster is something that we want to make sure is included. And Sandra, I don't know if you have anything else to add, but I know you're on here.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, let me put my video on as well. So I'll echo the fact that we need the single family rentals as well, and enough time certainly to figure out staffing and how we're going to incorporate all these inspections into our daily tasks. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, thank you all for your comments. And yes, and thank you, Trevor, for highlighting the resident group asks as well. The version of this that is attached is kind of like our base point, but there will be amendments prior to study session, assuming this makes it out of committee, so that we can incorporate those requests, and that's what we will be discussing with the full council. In terms of the fiscal impact, please, how much time, I guess, are we going to need to conduct that? Because that was one of the questions that I received from the resident groups earlier was, is this going to be on the agenda for the 16th, or is this going to be the following study session in November?
So if Councilmember Marcano, if we want to make changes to this and work through some of that, I don't know that it's feasible to get it on for Monday if the packet is pretty much ready for Monday. So reasonably, I would say later.
All right, so that would probably come before council on the 6th then, study session on the 6th? Or is that a meeting?
I think it's a study session.
Okay, great. Okay, sounds good. So we will discuss it then. But yeah, I definitely want those changes to be incorporated so that the rest of our colleagues are able to see what the intent is. So, all right. With that, Councilmember Coombs, do you have any questions on this item?
I do. So certainly, as we've discussed in the meetings with the community members, incorporating that single family and duplex and kind of smaller number of units properties is really important, I think. And again, for certainly my current constituents, that's top of mind because there are quite a few single family properties that are not being well maintained. And I know we also did discuss maybe a phased approach in that respect. So I don't know if that's something that's still under consideration where we start with the multifamily that's already under the current program. And that way the lift initially is not as big of a lift for the first year. And then in the second year, add the additional properties so that we have the time to kind of staff up, build up, look at the funding, all of those pieces that would be necessary to implement this effectively. So I don't know if that's still something that staff are wanting to look at as an option to make this really feasible. So if you can answer that first.
Yeah, the Denver did a 2-year implementation. I think that, particularly with what they're trying to get at, where they're trying to find the property owners and get them educated that this license is required. I think that's why they'd stretch that out so that they could stretch out those enforcement resources to do that outreach and try to get them licensed. So a 2-year process like Denver did would make it easier to do that. You know, I think kind of would do what you wanted, but I think that might be more effective to do that, more time to get there.
Yeah. And I guess, you know, to your point, I'm not sure that we could effectively do all of it at once in 1 year. It seems like that is a lot to ask, especially knowing that we probably are going to have to add positions to code enforcement to make that possible. And I don't think we probably can add enough positions to code enforcement in a supplemental and have a reasonable chance of approval by council.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think as much as it is definitely important to me that we include the single family, I also understand and would be in support of that extended timeline to make it actually effective and not just something we have in name only. My other question is with respect to the issues around retaliation. Is that going to be coming in a different conversation? Because it's not in this, which I understand, except that there are inspections required here, and there have been concerns about retaliation related to inspections that tenants have requested due to existing habitability problems. So I guess this would be a Councilmember Marcano question. Are you looking to bring in that non-retaliation component in a different process or a different piece of legislation?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So speaking with the tenants groups, they would like to actually chat with staff a little more about our existing programs to see what avenues are available to strengthen that approach. They're interested in the International Property Management Code that we wanted to bring in, but they're concerned that right now that would potentially open the door to more opportunities for retaliation. And there's also some statutory changes that we need to seek help from the legislature on. To ensure that we're doing everything, or that, you know, there's existing statute basically that would allow us to, you know, be a little more assertive in our tenant protections at the local level. So that is on hold for now, pending some conversations with staff. And I know that y'all sent me some times that you were available. I did send those off to the organizers, but did not hear back from them. So I'll follow up with the organizers again. So we'll probably have to set those meetings up maybe in November. Yeah, that's where that portion is at. So that's why all I'm bringing back right now is the compliance. You know, what was the term that you wanted to use, Trevor? Sorry, not the licensing, but it was
certification.
There we go. The certification program. Thank you. So yeah,
Councilmember Marcano, I know we discussed with them even just a flyer when we're doing our systematic housing inspections now. We notice the building and tenants that will be there. And I think we discussed adding just some tenant protection kind of information to that, and also Colorado Legal Services information. So it might be something we can do just programmatically without having to, you know, put it into ordinance kind of stuff. So I think those are things that we could do now, right away.
Yeah, I think that would be very helpful for the short term. But yeah, they do want to seek some, you know, they want the force of law on their side, basically, which I completely understand given how, you know, tenuous a lot of people's housing situations are. So yeah, so that will come back in the future. Does that satisfy the question, Councilor Coombs?
Yeah, thank you so much. And Jessica, I definitely would be in support of having that kind of information provided wherever appropriate.
I do want to highlight Councilor Murillo when she asked, or when she let us know that she would be unavailable for the meeting today. She did ask, will this apply to ADUs? And as written, it currently doesn't, but I think with the amendments, if we're looking at all residential property to include single family homes, we would capture ADUs in that net, correct? Yeah, I'm seeing Trevor.
I think so. I mean, we can make it happen if it's not automatically captured. Yeah.
All right, great. Yeah, and I would be supportive of that. In support of that. All right. So with that, given the pending changes to this, I would still like to move this forward to study session. The draft that comes to study session will be, an amended version of this. Councilmember Coombs.
I support that.
Fantastic. So we will go ahead and move it on to study session, and we'll have a fiscal note, right, to accompany that for that discussion.
We'll work towards putting something together. Probably won't be perfect, but yeah, we'll work on putting that together.
All right, thanks. I know this is a big lift, but I appreciate y'all. So, okay. So moving on to the next item, 4B, neighborhood improvement grant updates. And I believe we have Scott Campbell. Hey, Scott.
Good morning, everybody. Hello. If we could get the presentation shared, we can start walking through it.
You got it, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for your patience there. Sharing my screen now.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning again, everybody. I'm here to give just a brief update on our neighborhood engagement grants for this year, the improvement grants in particular. We can go ahead and hop to the next slide. So just as kind of a quick recap, so City Council was generous enough this year to give us another $60,000 for this grant project or process. We give out up to $5,000 per project. This is funded through the general fund. The program was designed originally to improve the appearance of Aurora neighborhoods while strengthening the social fabric and organizational networks of community residents. The general goals of the program include improving the physical condition of a neighborhood, enhancing neighborhood pride and identity, connecting neighbors and fostering a strong sense of community, and finally encouraging placemaking by bringing assets into the neighborhood that encourage gathering and positive experiences. Let's go ahead to the next slide. Thank you. So just some quick metrics from this year. We had 21 applicants. That's 31% more than we had last year. We awarded 14 groups this year. It's about on par with what we did last year. The total funding requests we got in were over $90,000, so about a 32% increase there. And as you can see, we did have representation for our awardees from each ward, so that's wonderful. We got a nice spread there. Let's go to the next slide. So here are just some really quick highlights from some of the projects that we got this year. This was a project out of Ward 1. It's the alleyway cleaning. This is a project that's been done and awarded kind of, I think for the last couple years. We see a lot of work. You can see there a lot of the material removed from the alleyways. The project they would do once a month. They'd rent essentially a U-Haul and a dumpster and just go throughout the alleyways and pick up trash. There's some of the volunteers and whatnot there. We really appreciate that project. Next slide. This was a project from the Prairie Ridge at Saddle Rock community. They did some re-landscaping of their entryways there. It was kind of a community project for them. You can see the left, that's kind of what it looked like beforehand, kind of dead and bare. And they've gone in and replaced it with some more water-wise materials. And you can see there's kind of a picture of them in the process of the residents actually doing the work. Next slide, please. This is a Shadow Creek project. This was an entryway and lighting project that they did. You can see there, the entryway sign got some nice new water-wise vegetation and flowers. And then they got a nice light in one of the green spaces in their area that was exceptionally dark at night. Next slide, please. And finally, here we have the Summit Park townhomes. They did kind of a combination project as well. They installed, I believe it was 3 total notice boards throughout their community like that to help get messaging around their community, as well as some lighting in those areas so that it was kind of providing a safe feeling at night for residents. We still have a couple projects ongoing. It doesn't technically wrap up until October 31st. So we'll still be getting some additional photos and whatnot in until the end of the month. But these were some just highlights I wanted to kind of make you all aware of to give you a temperature and feel of the type of projects that we are getting in and that have been awarded this year. With that, I am happy to take any questions or anything like that.
Thank you, Scott, for that update. And I just really like seeing, these changes happening in the community. The only comment that I have is that I feel like we just slightly underfunded this program, because I know that some folks got declined for things like, art to wrap utility boxes and stuff like that. So as some of my direct constituents were really disappointed to hear they didn't get approved for wrapping their utility box over where the new sidewalk was just built over by Dam West. So, I would just, hope in the future that we'd be able to, provide a little more funding for this so that we can do more, because I think these projects are really important. Councilmember Coombs?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, Scott, I guess my question is, were all of the projects that weren't funded not funded due to a lack of resources, or were there any projects that were not funded because they actually didn't meet the criteria?
I believe all of them were not funded just because we just didn't have the funding. So we allocate essentially up to the maximum amount, and then that's kind of where we just cut off, just because, again, like you pointed out, we just don't have the funding to fund everybody, unfortunately.
So if we had the resources allocated, you guys could fund all those projects. And is that escalation in number of applications and total cost, which is pretty consistent with the number of applications, something that you guys have continued to see over time? Like, is there a clear trend line, or is it kind of depends on the year?
Yeah. Great question. I think I think there is an increasing trend. It's one of those things where kind of the success breeds more success, right? So people see, hey, I know this community had a great project and we want to have something similar. And so it's pretty typical with my experience with grants, which is over time, just year after year, you do get, 20, 30% every year of requests growing, right? And it's just a matter of, does the funding increase, or what does that kind of look like to compensate for it? But yeah, I would suspect we'll continue to see 20 to 30% growth each year for this, up until we find some sort of plateau for that.
Yeah,
great. So yeah, I think that we as a council should probably look at a planned kind of escalation and investment in that, because these are small investments that really make a difference to the communities where they're located, and also in increasing that sense of community pride. Also improve things like lighting that improve public safety. And so I think it's, tiny investments that we can make that make a big difference. So that's something that I'll certainly advocate for moving forward, and really appreciate you taking the time to work with communities on these projects.
Thank you.
And actually, I have a follow-up on that, right? Because given that the delta between what we funded, which was 60,000, and what the total requests were, which was around 91,000, like, we have somewhere around $800,000 or $900,000 of one-time monies still sitting in that pot. So I guess this is more of a question for maybe Jessica or Roberto. We have not adopted our budget just yet. Would it be possible to add a requested amendment? I'm happy to sponsor it. Maybe Councilmember Coombs, if you're interested in co-sponsoring it, to just fully fund this round of grants, since the projects were worthy. And we have the one-time monies. These are one-time expenses. So I think it makes sense to just get them done. So it's important to our residents.
Councilmember Marcano, that is possible, but I think what we were also planning is to bring back that unallocated funds, which I think was in the $800,000 range, for you to be able to make other determinations on that. So it would be the same process, but rather than amending the budget, we would essentially bring that back to use those funds for this particular project. And then I think other council members have ideas on how they want to use that as well. So we could go through that round in the same way we did the first round of funds, the way we did the Bronco funding, et cetera. So I would suggest doing that rather than the budget amendment. But I can check in with Greg and Jason on the timing for bringing back the unallocated funds as well.
Yeah. I'm more, I guess, in terms of timing, when were we thinking of doing that? Because, some of us have a very short shelf life.
And some maybe not. So I will take a look with Jason. I don't think that was going to be a 6-month thing. I think that was going to be in the next 30 to 60 days to bring back to council how they wanted to use that. But let me confirm, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Hopefully I can catch him today and find out when he's going to do that, because I know the budget is on the agenda for the 23rd of October, first reading. So I'll get you an answer this week so that you can prepare either if you have to do that on the 23rd or if the timing works to do it with the unallocated soon thereafter, hopefully maybe in November.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just one other follow-up question. If there's some reason that we can't get this in before the adopted budget from the unallocated all council funds, can you find out if adding to this pot would be an acceptable use of unused council meeting and travel and training funds? So we have the $400 per year per ward, and then also the $7,000 per year per council member. And I know those just kind of roll over and build up and build up. I know I have used very little of mine. So I'm just wondering if that's an acceptable use of those funds, if we find that we're not able to get it added to the budget through the majority of council.
I know that we've been fairly flexible on how you guys have done that. Other council members in years past have allocated into a variety of different, some have given it directly to other nonprofits. I remember Councilman Mounier back in the day had done something similar. So I think we've been fairly flexible on that, but I'll confirm exactly how that can be used, if it can be used outside of another intended purposes on the city council budget or a city council directive. So I'll get that answer for you as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Roberto, I appreciate that. All right. So I believe this was informational only, right? So thank you again, Scott, for the presentation. I'm glad to see these things happening. So
thank you.
All righty. Next up, we have the 2023 Summer Community Investment Financing Round, and that's going to be, looks like Alicia Montoya.
Good morning, council members. My name is Alicia Montoya, Housing and Community Development Manager. And I have a presentation trying to share here. So give me just 1 second.
I shared it, Alicia.
It's all set.
Oh. Let me stop sharing because I did that too. Sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
No problem. Whenever you're ready for the next slide.
Are you sharing now? I don't see it. Oh, no, that's.
Andrew, there we go.
My apologies.
You're
When you
good.
did it, it took mine out. You should be set now.
Yeah, sorry about that, Andrew.
No worries.
Okay, awesome. So yes, this is the 2023 Community Investment Financing Round. This is the second round of the year that we do. And this one is usually a smaller amount of funding. So if we can go to the next slide, Andrew, please. You're spoiling us. I'm not used to this. Okay, so just super quick on the purpose of the Community Investment Financing Round. The application is to provide resources, specifically financial resources, to developers to help us close the gap in affordable housing units that we had specifically identified through the housing strategy. Next slide, please. There are certain policies that we follow as we're implementing the housing strategy. The community investment financing process was created because of the housing strategy. And so those policies of balancing our affordable housing portfolio, of increasing the capacity, strengthening the local economy are all policies that we apply through this process because it is part of the housing strategy. Next one, please. When we're looking at the application or the applications that are submitted to us, again, just with that focus on the housing strategy, we look to make sure that we are covering the demographics that the housing strategy had identified. We look at average median income, we look at cost effectiveness, and then we look at the overall available funding. Sometimes we get applications that are not necessarily aligned with the funding that we have, and so we have to just look at the different funding sources and what applies. Next slide, please. And actually, I'm going to have Sarah present on this, on the rest of the slides. Just 1 second.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Carroll. I'm the Housing Development Supervisor. And so we started this process back in June of 2023. And now we are here at October the 12th. We did our application. It went live in the paper on July 10th. The period opened for applications on July 10th, and we closed the application process on August 15th. Our review committee met on August 30th and we issued recommendations. The pre-award letters went out the week of September the 4th, and here we are letting you know what our recommendations are. Andrew, next slide, please. So the review committee, again, they met. It was looking at the application's responsiveness to the requirements. We met on August 24th. Yeah, that's correct. We had to push it back because we actually ended up closing the application a little bit later on August the 18th. Folks that were on the recommendation committee were from planning, finance, community development, and our citizens advisory committee as well. Next slide, please. So we received 7 applications requesting $26,900,000, and all we had to award was a total of 4.5 million. So we had a really excessive amount of funding requested. We actually recommended an award of $2.2 million for this round. Next slide, please. So of the 7 we received, you can see here were Project Worthmore, Radiant Inn Motel, a BIPOC partnership for scattered sites, and Halo Field of Dreams gave us 4 applications. You can see who the developers are and the scores that were awarded, as well as the income levels served. Next slide, please. We did not award Halo Field of Dreams. There were a total number for them of 75 units. And also we did not recommend award for the BIPOC partnership as well. And they had an application for 10 to 15 units. Next slide, please. And next slide, please. So for the Roots, which was Project Worthmore, it's in Ward 1. There were 0 units, but they had a target of at or below 50%. They requested actually $2 million. They're doing an update on their public service building, and there they are asking for funding to do the updates. And what they do is they're going to do public services, which is like a dental clinic and other public services for our folks in our that live in the Aurora, as well as our immigrant community as well. So they had an actual score of 53.3, and the reason that we went ahead and awarded them, we recommended $500,000 in CDBG, is because it's a first-time award for them, and it does fit the CDBG. So we did a risk analysis, and giving them that lower award also helps us to allow them the opportunity to receive the funding, but it also serves that lower income AMI. Next slide, please. The Radiant Inn Motel, they are actually the FACTS partnership asked for, as you can see there, $4.5 million. Like, let's see, $4.5 million. We recommended 1.7 million in CDBG CV. However, since that time, unfortunately, their deal fell through. So we will be actually asking that recommendation not be given to them because of the deal falling through. Our money is tied to an actual deal actually making it, and we just found out 2 days ago that it did not go through. So we're going to actually contact them. We've reached out to let them know that we will not be recommending that funding to them as well. So that's new since this slideshow came through. So next slide, please. The BIPOC was the scattered sites for 10 to 15. These were actually homeowner for home ownership. They asked for 1.5 in CDBG. Their score was 41.82. We're trying to get those who score like 70 and above. We're going to reach out to this agency. We're going to try to get them tied in with some other agencies that are doing this sort of funding requests and also doing this sort of development, and try to get them with the developers so they can help them build up their resume and help them do the deals. We do want them to come back to us for funding. We don't have anything against them. We just want them to get in the game and learn a little bit more before we give them funding, because obviously there's risk involved with awarding them CDBG. Next slide. And Halo Field of Dreams, this gentleman, he had 4 applications, so you'll see 3 more screens. He scored very low. He asked for a lot of money. We didn't have PAB on the table, nor did we have ARPA on the table. This is another developer that he's got great dreams, and we're really excited to see what he wanted to do. We are reaching out to him as well to get him involved with some developers in the area so that he can learn some skills as well. He did not have any development skills. He seems to be more like a handyman, and we want him to be able to build those skills and come back to us in the future with some development skills and help Aurora build affordable housing. Next slide, please. And again, Halo Field of Dreams, application number 2, same story. He asked for $2.3 million and we did not award any funding. Next slide, please. Again, he asked for 2.2 and we did not award or recommend any funding. Next slide, please. And application number 4, he asked for $7 million in PAB and we did not recommend any funding for him as well. Next slide, please. Our question for you is, first, do you have any questions for us?
My thanks for the presentation. So yes, I do have a question for you. And this actually goes back to the BIPOC submittal, because I see that it's for, this is part of the Scattered Sites Community Land Trust, right? I think with elevation, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I guess I'd like more information, like why are they scoring so low? I know that elevation's been around for a little bit, and we've, I guess, previously partnered with them in Aurora. Because, you know, I'm a big believer in community land trust. I think it's a great model, especially because you often get homeownership out of the deal, right?
Sure.
So can we a little more about that?
Yeah, we actually like Elevation Community Land Trust a great deal. We are having an issue with them. They're not getting the 10 to 15 scattered sites in a timely manner. And we already have some money out with them for some scattered sites, so they're not finished with that. So we want to get the money that we have with them already, you know, spent and that contract fulfilled before we, you know, give them another pot of money, and make sure that those funds are, that contract is fulfilled before we go ahead and give them another contract. You know what I'm saying? We don't want a bunch of open contracts with them where they're not fulfilling those purchases.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I guess I'd like some more information then. When you say that they're not fulfilling the contracts, like, have we with the previous funds, we've granted them funds, but they haven't actually spent through them to acquire properties? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct.
Okay, and have they given us a reason as to why?
It just takes them time. They haven't given us a reason why. We'll definitely follow up with that and get you that information.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Coombs?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of follow-up there as well. You know, certainly the scattered sites land trust idea is promising. And I'm wondering, is the city at all working with them or with any other entities that are interested in this type of program to look at properties that are not being cared for, that have a consistent history of code enforcement violations and complaints, where neighbors may be complaining that the parcels are abandoned and creating problems for the neighborhood? Like, are we trying to address those types of problem properties through this scattered sites program, where we can rehab properties that are currently creating harm into places where people could, you know, could live, could have home ownership opportunities?
Sure. So we do work very closely with code enforcement on problem properties. Josh and the supervisors in code enforcement, they do know to come to me for preservation. And as far as like abandoned homes, I have not had any complaints about those, to have Elevation Community Land Trust go in and purchase those and get them updated and things like that. That's something, that's an opportunity for us that I can certainly look into. Does that answer your question completely?
It does.
Or?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that really is an opportunity, and I
Sure.
may follow up with some folks that I've spoken with who have had complaints about properties in their neighborhoods.
Great. I would appreciate that. Definitely we'll look into slum and blight opportunities for sure.
Yes, I strongly support that idea. All right. So do we support the expenditures as stated here, Councilmember Coombs?
Yes.
All right, so do I. So thank you all so much for the presentation.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
You as well. All righty, moving on. 4D, homelessness NOFOs. And who is our presenter for this one? Emma Knight. Emma, you've got the floor.
Thank you. Good morning. It is still morning. Good morning, council members. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Emma Knight, manager of homeless programs. And yeah, gonna just be talking to you today about our notice of funding opportunity for our homeless services funds. Next slide, please. So we sought proposals from nonprofits, faith-based organizations, and public agencies who have experience providing homeless services. Next slide, please. We had several forms of funding available, including Emergency Solutions Grant, which is federal from HUD and assists people to quickly regain stability in housing and homelessness prevention. It's also often used for sheltering and outreach, things like that. Home Tenant-Based Rental Assistance Program, or TBRA, assists households to afford housing costs for market rate units. Next slide, please. And then our marijuana funding, which you all know is from our marijuana tax revenue. And then Public Safety Assistance Grant, which was formerly Nexus. And this program helps people experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness through partnerships with public safety entities and homeless services providers. Next slide, please. So overview of our funding that we actually had available this year. We had $1.4 million available of marijuana funding. Our ESG was 213,000, public safety 140, and home TBRA was 200, just equaling out to a total of just under $2 million available for funding. Next slide, please. So just to compare from previous years, we talked about this at previous sessions, but we have significantly less funding available this year as we did prior years. And that's mostly because marijuana tax revenue has been down. So as you can see, since 2022, it's been going down. In 2023, we moved some stuff around to be able to backfill some of the funding. That's why it's at 3.9, but it was lower than that, but we backfilled. So we just moved some stuff to general funds to be able to do that and still be able to fund some of our service providers. And again, this year we're at 1.4, which is just about half of, or yeah, less than half what we had previously. All the other ones have stayed at least similar the last 2 years, except for public safety, again, went down significantly between 2022 and 2023. And those public safety funds, I believe, come from red light. Actually, I can't remember what those are from. Jessica, can you remind me what public safety funds come from?
They used to be the red light camera funds, which changed. So they're coming from dedicated revenue from ticketing, but that's why those have declined and they're kind of stabilized now. So in that kind of $100,000 range.
Thank you for that. All right, next slide, please. So we decided to do 1-year grants this time around. The last time we did a NOFO, it was a 2-year, or it was a 1-year grant with the ability to renew for a 2nd year. And this time we're just doing the 1 year, just because we are seeing the differences in funding coming through, and it's hard to guarantee to our service providers that we'll have the same amount of funding 2 years in a row. So to help them plan better and for our own purposes, it's just easier to do 1 year. So folks that get approved will receive that 1-year agreements and those funds for 1 year starting January 1. Next slide, please. So grant requirements. All subrecipients have to use our Homeless Management Information System, or HMIS. And that's for many reasons, but this really helps us keep track of things better and get better data so that we can make more informed decisions about how to spend our funds. And then quarterly reports are required, plus 1 annual report. Payment requests at minimum, we need to be turned in quarterly as an invoice, and then with all required documentations, and that's all through our Neighborly software, and that's through all of our funding sources. And this year, newly, we are requiring all awardees to provide at least 1 staff member to assist with a point-in-time count. The point-in-time count is widely used all year, and anyone receiving funding from us, we thought it was important for them to participate in that as a benefit to them as well. Next slide, please. And for application requirements, it was a fairly lengthy application, but we used essentially the same one as the prior year. So most folks should have already had everything pretty much lined up of what they need and a good idea of how the application worked. I'm not going to go through all of these, but yeah, we really asked for a good chunk of documentation so that we can really see what our applicants are working with, where they are financially, and just exactly what their project is asking for. Next slide, please. We also required all applications to be complete for them to be considered. And yeah, all documentation, and we were not able to use things that were submitted prior. These all had to be newly submitted with this application, even if the same agency had applied for the same thing the previous year. We needed updated versions of all of these things. Next slide, please. So our review panel, we really tried to have folks from some other agencies involved, and we gave them between September and October to review our applications that we received, and we had 4 folks from the Housing and Community Services Department, between homelessness and the and Alicia's department in housing development, because they work more with HUD than I do. And then we had someone from the Aurora Finance Department, and then Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, or MDHI, one staff member from them, and 1 staff member from Arapahoe County. Next slide, please. So I think we already went over this, but at least the amounts that we had available, which was, again, just under $2 million. And we received a total of 25 applications from 11 different agencies, which total amount requested was $3.494 million, which, again, we only had just under $2 million. So it was significantly more asked than what we had available, which made the review particularly difficult. Next slide, please. So for scoring, max score for everything other than ESG was 100 points, and for ESG we had 105, as we require a match of funds for ESG, so that added an additional 5 points. And then each category was up to 15 points, and there were 10 categories. Some were more weighted than others, and ESG had 11 categories, again with that match. So as you can see, all the categories are below. We're really mostly trying to look at, are these agencies able to do what they're saying they're going to do, what's their past with us, have they been successfully submitting, if they have worked with us before, were they successful at submitting reports and invoices in a timely manner, and are they collaborating with other service organizations, things like that. Next slide, please. And while we were reviewing everything, we really tried to stress to our panel to consider, are the services requested essential life-saving services? Because again, having roughly $1 million or $2 million less than we normally do, we really wanted to make sure we are funding life-saving services, as those are the most important. We also wanted folks to look at the Aurora at Home strategic plan and make sure that these applications are in alignment with that. And then prior grant compliance, and we're also really looking at agencies' other funding streams to make sure that, one, they're applying for other funds. We cannot be the only one funding these agencies, as again, we have limited funds. So we want to make sure that these agencies are looking elsewhere as well. Next slide, please. So going into our actual recommendations, we only had one applicant for the home TBRA, and that's Aurora Housing Authority. They've gotten this the last few years, and they do a great job with it. And they requested the full amount, which we gave them because, again, they were the only applicant. So we're requesting or recommending $200,000 for them. Next slide, please. So the Emergency Solutions Grant, or ESG, is used for rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention. So Aurora Mental Health, for their detox and recovery night shelter, requested $112,840, and we're recommending them for $50,000. We are not recommending Colorado Safe Parking Initiative for funding on this because their project does not qualify under ESG. Same with Family Tree, their gold program, what they were asking for doesn't technically qualify under ESG. And then Gateway Domestic Violence requested $50,000, and we're recommending them for $35,000. Salvation Army, their Housing Now, rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention, requested $130,520. We're recommending at $48,088. And then Mile High Behavioral Health Care's Midas program requested $148,734, and we're recommending $80,000. So again, and you're going to see this with a lot of the categories, we receive roughly twice the amount of requested funds as we actually have available. So that's why we were trying to make sure that we're giving all the programs funding if available, while also trying to make sure that the life-saving programs are getting funded at a higher level. Next slide, please. Public safety, we only had 3 requests for this, and these were the same 3 that we funded last year. So Sungate Kids requested $30,000. We're recommending $17,000. Mile High Behavioral Health Care for their Midas program requested $115,000, and we requested recommending $103,000. And then Aurora Mental Health Behavioral Health Crisis Response, which is with ACOT, they were requested $27,025, and we're recommending $20,000 for them, while only funding their clinicians and admins for that program specifically. Next slide, please. And now getting into the really long one, marijuana. We had a lot of, this is actually 2 pages of this, so we had a lot again for this. Aurora Housing Authority for their Aurora at Home navigation requested $235,000, and we're recommending $100,000. I think they had the highest scoring application from all of the applications. And so Aurora Mental Health Care, their Pathways to Home, the PATH program, requested $125,000, and we're recommending $30,000. Bridge House Ready to Work requested $100,000, and we're not recommending them for funding this time around. Same with Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. We're not recommending them for funding. They don't do emergency service. Neither does Bridge House. Theirs isn't an emergency service program. And Colorado Safe Parking Initiative, for their Aurora lots, requested 213,000. We're recommending 75,000 for that program. Family Tree, their goals program, we're not recommending this time around. They get a lot of funding from other funding streams, and due to our lower funding amounts this year, we didn't feel like we could fund them this time around. Gateway Domestic Violence requested 199,000. We're recommending 60,000 for them. Next slide, please. And then Mile High Behavioral Health Care. We are recommending funding for all of their programs other than mobile case management, which was just a change of their name from their outreach services, which we're not funding outreach services this year, as we're funding that through other sources, like our city outreach program is funded through a different source. So we're trying to make sure we're funding all the other life-saving services that we have available. So Comitis requested 500,000. We're recommending 300,000. The ADRC requested 500,000. We're recommending 200,000. And then Colfax Community Network requested 275,000. We're recommending 30,000. They're not emergency services, but we still see them as a vital service. So we're funding them at a significantly lower amount, but still funding them. And then Restoration Christian Ministries for their safe outdoor spaces or space. They just have the one. They requested 500,000, and we're recommending 175,000, and just for funding their utilities, which they operate and cover all the utilities for the safe outdoor spaces and the safe parking lot on their site. And then Salvation Army requested 500,000 for both of their safe outdoor spaces, 2 separate applications, and we're recommending them for 90,000 for each. We're funding them through several other funding streams, including some ARPA and congressional funds that we're still waiting on getting, but they're still doing a lot of essential services for us, so we thought it was important to still fund them through this as well. So again, we received a lot of requests for funding for marijuana, over almost $5 million in that, and again, we only had 1.4 million, so this was particularly hard to fund these and figure out how to recommend these. Next slide, please. So this is just the breakdown of totals of what we're recommending, and that includes all of the funding streams for each. And these are all of the agencies that we are recommending funding for. Next slide, please. So our question for council is, does council support the recommendations provided and move forward to study session? And what questions do you have for us?
All right. Thank you, Emma, for the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and defer to Councilor Coombs first for questions on this one. I will be right.
Great. Thank you so much. So I have a few questions. In terms of the programs that are supporting youth and families, so I'm thinking particularly Family Tree Goals and CCN, do we know what kind of gap they may have as a result of us not providing an award? And are there any other funding streams that we can identify from within city funding sources and existing city programs that we could provide to them? And if not, just based on the actual services that these programs provide, would staff be supportive of helping council to identify other general fund revenues for supporting these programs?
Sure. So I'm not sure exactly what the funding gap would be for them. I can look into that and get you an answer for that specific question. As far as other funding streams, we did recommend to everyone who applied to also please apply for the ESG/Prop 123 funding that the state has out right now. They have a lot of money available through that funding stream right now for a lot of different sources like rapid rehousing and homelessness prevention, and outreach services can be funded through that. So there's a lot that can be funded through that, and we really pushed people to apply. The city applied for some of that as well, to provide some more services. As far as
I know both agencies have applied for that funding through the state. There's also other opportunities for families, whether that's through the county and family navigators and TANF funds and things like that. So when people apply to us, they are looking at, we ask for the leveraged funds, we ask for sort of their total look. But certainly, I'm sure there are gaps there. And in terms of other funding streams, I don't know that we have any that meet this sort of mold specifically for families experiencing homelessness for many other funding sources in the city. So if that's something council's interested in looking at to fill those gaps, we can look at the applications that were submitted and at least provide numbers for what would shore up those applications.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. And then you mentioned outreach, Emma, from the state funds, the Prop 123 funds. And so I definitely will want to check in on whether or not there's a successful application there from Mile High. I guess my concern is that our city outreach teams may be pretty inundated with encampment focused and like abatement and sweeps focused activities, and may not be able to provide as kind of more holistic and just generally supportive case management and engagement type services as what's being provided by Mile High when they're doing outreach. So can you comment on the impact of currently abatements on our outreach teams and their ability to do any other type of services that aren't connected to abatements?
Sure. So we actually have our outreach team starting on Monday. We've just had the supervisor for a while. It's taken us some time to hire. But the supervisor has been going out and helping with a lot of things unrelated to abatements, and our actual abatement liaison folks who are covering the abatements do some level of outreach on their own as well with the folks at the camps, which frees up some time for our outreach workers that will be going out. And I can't speak to how much time they'll have yet, since, as I said, they're just starting on Monday. We'll see how that goes. Aurora Mental Health still has their outreach team, which chose not to continue with funds with us as we were asking them to help transport folks from abatements to shelter, which they didn't really want to be involved with that. So we weren't funding them anymore, but they continue to have their outreach team that goes out and does regular outreach every week. And then I believe Mile High actually was awarded a significant amount of funding for outreach from I think from the state. I'd have to look at their application again, but they have other funding and they did apply for funds through the state for the Prop 123. So I don't see it happening that we'll have less outreach available. We just won't be funding all of it through the city this time.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Any further?
And that, I guess, concludes like my specific questions. In general, I'm just concerned about obviously the significant decrease because of our dependence on marijuana funds. And so I do want to have some conversation with council. I know you all cannot actually of your own accord address this issue. You're just working with the money that you have been allocated. But I would like to have some conversations with council about what we can do to backfill some of that decrease in marijuana revenue to make sure that we're actually supporting our community members and addressing this issue, right? Just being like, well, we have half the money, so we can only do half the stuff in the face of the crisis that we're currently dealing with seems inadequate. And again, that's on us, not you, to figure out how we address that issue.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Coombs. Yeah, and I'll just add my agreement with that statement. You know, our residents are asking us to do more, not less, to get this issue under control in our community. So I think that the full council needs to, you know, step up and be able to, you know, meet the funding obligations that we have here to ensure that we're not, you know, putting you all under more stress and frankly underserving the folks who need our help. So, all right, and thank you for the update there. And do you approve moving this forward to study session, Councilor Coombs?
Yes.
All right, as do I. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All righty. Item number 4E, resolution approving an IGA between the City of Aurora's Youth Violence Prevention Program and Aurora Public Schools for data sharing. Joseph, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Councilmember Marcano. Good morning, everyone. Joseph D. Herrera, manager of the Youth Violence Prevention Program. I promise I will be short and sweet with this IGA. Really, we are, what we're hoping to accomplish with this is just to have streamlined data sharing opportunities with APS, looking both at, you know, youth and students that are truant currently or having some potential behavior concerns, those types of things that has been or have been documented from the schools, but really just trying to gain a deeper understanding of data and of the youth that we can better serve. So identifying risk factors and then being able to provide those resources to these youth and their families really is the ultimate goal for this. And we are in the process of having the exact same type of agreement with Cherry Creek School District. We're just waiting for it to go through the process of their signatures and everything on their side. So we would be having one coming forward for Cherry Creek as well. Again, just to streamline the data sharing and make sure that we're getting the resources to the youth and families within the school districts.
All right. Thank you for that overview. And I am always excited to see more collaboration between the city and our school districts. I do have a question regarding privacy, of course, because some of this information is going to be sensitive. So can you talk to us a little bit about how we're going to guarantee the students and the families' privacy as part of this?
Absolutely, yeah. So we, of course, with some of these students, they most of them most likely will be minors and those types of things. So that's why we wanted to have this agreement in place, because it is going to be sharing data. What we've wanted to focus on is so as you see in section B, it's all of those categories is the data that we're wanting to obtain if possible. However, with that, the biggest thing that we're going to be looking for is just a name and contact information. That's at the bare minimum what we would be wanting. We don't necessarily, especially sharing, you know, specific events, those types of things. We don't want that to be happening. And if it is happening, we, of course, will be doing it through either encrypted email or secure email. Really, we just want to make sure that we're getting the information to be able to contact these youth and their families. And it's honestly just that. There's not really anything, it's not going to be used for anything else. It's just simply to make sure that we're reaching the students before, you know, especially if they're, like I said before, you know, truant, before they maybe go down another path, just trying to kind of have some of those preventative intervention conversations and get them connected with our case manager and other resources.
Okay. Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that. And that's what I suspected. I just wanted to make sure that was on the record.
Yeah, of course. No problem.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Coombs?
No, I don't have any further questions. I think you covered it. But thank you so much, Joseph, for your presentation.
Of course. Thank you.
And the question for us is, do we approve this and move it forward to study? I am in favor.
I am as well.
All righty, so it will happen. All right, thank you again, Joseph.
Of course, thank you both.
Last up on our agenda is miscellaneous matters for consideration. So I have a miscellaneous matter for staff. And that is, I was recently knocking doors around Village Green Park, and I happened to walk by the Alabama Place home. Y'all might recall this is the one where we had squatters, and it looks like there's still a big dumpster out there. And I swear I saw someone hopping the fence while I was out there. So can we get an update as to what's going on with that property still? Because I thought that the abatement was already done.
Yeah, so let me put my video on. So yeah, I talked to Manny, the code enforcement officer that was out there, and he says actually they've been remodeling entirely the inside. He was going to take some pictures for me, but he knows what's happening. They're in the process of getting it ready remodeling, replacing all the walls, taking care of everything and the fence. So I can get some photos and forward those on if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Sandra.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Okay, good to hear. All right, so hopefully whoever was jumping the fence was, realized that this is not a safe place to do whatever they were intending to do. So
Yeah, I'll let Manny know that somebody's jumping the fence and make sure he'll pass that on to that person who's developing that property. We don't want that to start up again.
no, exactly. Thank you. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All righty. And do we have any updates from community members on the call? All right, seeing none. So I guess I'm not the usual chair here, so I do want to ask, do we know what's going to be on the agenda for our next meeting?
Councilmember Marcano, offhand, I do not.
Okay.
We usually do an annual housing strategy update that would come to Horns in November and then to the full council in December. But given the election, we may wait on that until after the election, so any new council members can be privy to that information as well. So at this point, I do not have exact agenda items for next month.
All righty, great. Well, thank you all for your time. And with that, we are adjourned. Take care, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.